Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. I'm very excited to have my next guest on the show, Dr. Nicolas Dogris. He is the Neurorehabilitation Director at FHE Health at Deerfield Beach, Florida. And he is on the show. He's probably the smartest guy out there, at least I think. He talks all about the brain and how we can heal the brain to be your better self. Dr. Dogris, welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I like the spinning skull behind you.
Everybody comments on that. It's my buddy. And they say, what are you going to take that down? It's after Halloween. I said, no, he stays up all the time. That's kind of like my little meditation thing.
I hope you named it.
Yeah, I haven't yet. Maybe I should. Now, we were talking a little bit, Doctor, before I got on the show. Most of my listeners know that I was a former patient at Shatterproof. I'm now blessed to work with them. But one of the highlights of my treatment was the neurostimulation, and that you help kind of bring on with FHE Health. Can you talk a little bit about your background and how you got into this field, sir?
Sure. I've been in the field of neuromodulation and neurotherapy since I don't even want to say it, 1987. Yeah, 1987 was when I began.
It's the year I graduated high school. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, Humboldt State University. I attended there. I worked under Dr. John Morgan and Dr. James Knight, and we did some early what's called ERP studies, or evoked potential studies, looking at the brainwave responses to different kinds of stimulation. And that's how I kind of began in the field. It was actually my intention to become a NASA astronaut and to go into space. And yeah, there's a whole story behind that, but we don't have time for that. Anyway, I ended up getting derailed from that one and went into the clinical field. At that point in time, I was working for this guy down in Long Beach, California. His name was Dr. Dan Staso. And Dan was a friend with Margaret Ayers. Margaret would go down in history as being the first person to actually patent a neurofeedback device in the United States in the early 1990s. She actually did the first one. And I was one of her students. And I actually helped her fix her computer one day. And it just so happens that she was going to UCLA Medical Center to work on somebody there that was in a coma. And after a couple of hours of working on this person, she actually woke up this guy out of a coma.
Oh.
Yeah. And so you have to understand, for me, I was getting my PhD in psychology with an emphasis on prescribing psychologists. I was going to, prescribe medications and take that route in terms of, medical based psychology. And I was going through this program, and what she showed me pretty much defied everything I had ever learned about the brain. And she basically looked at me and said, yeah, most of what you learned is wrong. Wow. And it's a real gut punch, when you've been in school for many years and whatnot. But seeing is believing, and I saw it, and I thought, this is the route I want to go down. And so I learned from her, and then I would eventually go off and do my own thing and start learning different systems. And I have a computer science background, so I started designing different kinds of software and protocols to treat the brain. And went into private practice, and after getting my doctorate, and designing a whole bunch of different things. But the neurofield system was designed. Necessity is the mother of invention. I have a son that's 20 years old. He was born premature and had hypoxic brain damage, and so I had to figure out a way to be able to stimulate a baby's brain safely. Yeah. And so I did. Came up with this method to do a low, very, very low level electromagnetic stimulation of the brain. Wow. And when you get that, it increases blood flow, and the brain is the best doctor in the room. If you just give it a little bit of a nudge, it can actually repair itself pretty quickly. And so, with the help of a very experienced radio analog engineer, we designed this system. And we didn't have the intention of doing anything with it other than treating our kids with it. And I was getting my board certifications in quantitative EEG at the time, and my mentor, who was a famous professor at Utah University School of Medicine, he said, "You have to release this thing. You can't.
Wow.
You have the ethical obligation of releasing this thing."
Sure.
And so I did so, and ever since then, we've been on this path of evolving the technology and making it better and better, and creating different generations of equipment.
Wow. Well, how come, doctor, that I hear a lot about neurofeedback. A lot of people I talk to, they've heard of neurofeedback, but I'm sure in medical circles, maybe neurostimulation, obviously, I'm assuming is more prevalent in those discussions. But how come you don't hear a lot more about neurostimulation in mainstream? You know what I mean? Within treatment.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's still considered investigational in the United States. And so the FDA hasn't made it an approved method of treatment that could be widely distributed for the home user, basically.
Sure.
There are a couple devices that are available that do it, but really they're very limited in their capabilities. And so we're in clinical trials right now to make our system available to everyone. But the United States is in last place when you look at people around the world. There are people in the EU, in the UK, Canada, Japan, Australia, Russia. This is a mainstream form of treatment because they have seen it. There's numerous studies showing the effectiveness and safety of direct current, alternating current, random noise stimulation for the brain. And I'm sitting on a library now of probably 90 gigabytes of data that I've collected over the years showing the efficacy.
Yeah.
So the reason is that, the United States is last place. I think it's because we're so medication oriented.
Yeah. We'd just rather put people on medication.
Right. It's
kind of put a Band-Aid on it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's fast, it's effective. And you can get a clinical result. And I think the tide's starting to change now because we actually show equivalence now with that of medication in our studies. And I can show you some data if you want to see it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. The whole thing was like, is it safe? Number one. And number two, can you achieve a treatment effect that is equivalent to that of a medication treatment effect? And the answer is yes to both questions.
Well, and I think I mentioned before we started, doctor, that I went through the neurostimulation. And after about the fifth treatment, it was, and I use this analogy, it was like a light switch that went on. I went through 18 treatments of neurostimulation. I was down at Shatterproof and FHE. And that, along with the other treatment modalities that we offer, that was a game changer for me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because
it's no surprise.
Because I just thought, okay, it is what it is. I didn't really, of course, I'm not a doctor like you or a scientist or anything. I didn't as a matter of fact, when they first told me, do you want to go through this? I thought electric shock therapy. I was like, no, I don't want to. But through the subsequent treatment, I was amazed. And like you said, we can actually heal the brain.
Yeah.
It's amazing. But yeah, I'd love to see your data, sir.
Sure. Let me do a share here. Oh, you gotta enable screen sharing on the bottom of your screen. Look for the little green button, and then you can click on the up thing and allow participant sharing. And that'll make me dangerous.
All right, it should work now.
Let's give it a shot. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. So you should be able to see my screen now.
I do. I see your screen.
Okay, cool. So let's go and talk about safety first, because that's really the big one. So right here is it's one of the more recent papers that have been done, but this one's really cool because it's a meta-analysis. If you talk about you're going to put electricity through my brain, is that safe? That's a great question. And nobody should be touching you unless they can 100% answer that question. Well, this study answers it. It's a meta-analysis where they took 158 studies with over 4,130 participants. and they reviewed to see if there were any significant adverse reactions to the treatment. Not a single person had a significant adverse reaction. That means that you're irrevocably harmed as a result of the treatment. Nobody had an issue, 4,000 people. Now, medication studies can't make that claim. There is always somebody that has a significant adverse response, meaning somebody dies or somebody has, some kind of event occur that, is irreversible. This type of technology doesn't have that, as long as you adhere to the safety standard.
Sure.
And the standard is that the duration of treatment shouldn't be more than 40 minutes. The maximum amplitude of stimulation should not exceed more than 4 milliamps, and which means that you don't create heat in the brain.
Sure.
Now, where we're at is the maximum that we actually go to is 2.5 milliamps. So we're well below the maximum of the safety standards, and we keep our sessions at 30 to 40 minutes. That's the first thing. Second thing that's really exciting is that the mechanism of action has been very well defined as to why does this actually flip the switch as you're going through this. Now, it should never be used as a standalone treatment. It should be used in conjunction with psychotherapy and different kinds of therapy so that you learn.
And you get the maximum effect.
The thing about it, though, is like, when people go through treatment, especially like addiction treatment, but mental health treatment as well, is that they go, well, I've done this 1,000 times. It never really clicked for me. And it's because they usually have some kind of neurological issue that's preventing them from learning. But when you give this stimulation, this little Ca2 plus and Na2 plus, these are calcium ions in the astrocytes. It's a part of your brain that actually connects the cortex to the limbic system. And when there's issues and problems, that part of the brain doesn't communicate correctly. And so we call that neuroplasticity. The ability of the brain to connect is rigid. But when you actually give this stimulation, it makes the brain go into an accelerated form of neuroplasticity where all of a sudden you can start to learn. And so it's hyper accelerated. It actually lasts for up to 90 minutes after every session. And so as a person goes through this, they're also doing psychotherapy, they're doing group therapy, and all of a sudden stuff starts to click.
You
start to feel a difference, and you kind of go, wow, I don't know where that really, or what you already know starts to actually become something you can access. And so this is, the brilliance of the technology, and our CEO of this company. He was the one who said, if we could help people to learn better, it'd be great. If we could, get that brain working in a way we could really get those skills across. And he's been the person spearheading this entire process at FHE, and God bless him for it.
Absolutely.
He really did see the missing link with all this, and this technology is part of that. And it helps to facilitate the rest of the learning. So then we started looking at specific kinds of issues like opioid addiction, and talking about different centers of the brain that don't communicate correctly, and how that can be an issue in terms of regulating what's called the pain network. And so we came up with some different protocols to do that, and looked at modeling different areas of the brain and seeing if we could actually accurately model them. Turned out we could, and we had some pretty cool data to show that we were actually hitting it the way we were intending to. Now, I'm going to just kind of quickly go into our findings. What we look at the opioid groups, and we wanted to see if there would be significant changes above and beyond control groups. And so for the last 4 years, we've been collecting this data, and these little brain maps are different frequencies in the human brain. And if you see it on the far left map here, these are probability values. These are probabilities that are greater than 0.001, which is pretty darn good statistics, showing changes in various frequency bands. And namely, the delta theta bands would change dramatically. And we saw these happen in the male opioid groups, for eyes open, for eyes closed, for the females, and the same thing. And then we looked at alcohol addiction and saw that males had magnificent changes in the brain as compared to in the eyes open, eyes closed. We have 450 subjects. Females, same thing. And then we looked at benzodiazepine addiction, and we were able to show significant changes there.
Amazing.
And then stimulant addictions showed significant changes. I won't go into all this because
Yeah.
it's a lot of talking, but basically what it came down to was like, how do you know it's actually working? And so this is what it looked like when people came in. These are the females. This is their anxiety scores. The blue bar is their pre-test, and the orange is the post-test. And if it has a score of 10 or higher, it's clinically significant. And so we found that all the females that came in had clinically significant anxiety scores in each one of these drug categories. And then as opposed to when they came out of treatment, their scores had dropped below the clinical levels, which means that it wasn't necessarily of clinical intensity. So we showed our treatment effect this way with females. And then same thing with depression. The PHQ-9 is a standardized measure for depression. We showed the same kind of drops. And then same with males. You look at the males, big drops all below the clinical levels, and the male depression drop. And then when we took a control group, we added controls into this, and you can see how dramatically more effective when you add neurostimulation to the existing program. The actual clinical effect is significantly better as compared with the controls. The clinical effect is there, but it's nowhere near when you add neurostimulation to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Same with depression too.
And I remember getting a pre-scan and a post-scan, and the difference was amazing.
Yeah, that's what I was alluding to earlier.
Yeah,
that, we found that it was safe. Recidivism levels dropped down significantly. Length of stay in the treatment program went up. People wanted to stay in because they were feeling better and they're getting something out of it. So we have a really good data set that shows us that it's effective. And now what we're doing is we're expanding the analysis and making it more, I would say, comprehensive. Looking at people with traumatic brain injuries, a lot of first responders, sustained concussions, and low-level brain injury, don't even know it, just in the line of duty, doing their regular job, shaking it off, and kind of doing their thing. And then different kinds of illnesses and problems manifest afterwards.
Absolutely.
So we're starting to identify them and saying, wow, you may have had a TBI, I didn't even know it.
Now, is the average, because I did about 5, doctor, before I started, is that the average? I mean, because, people are different, obviously. So what is the recommended, treatment? How many treatments do you have before you really start feeling it?
We were showing on the average around 7.
Okay.
7 treatments, and then the clinical effect would come in. But for some people, they started to feel it after the first 2 or 3.
Yeah.
They were like, something's happening. I can't really put my finger on it. And around 5, they usually are feeling something, but on the average, it was 7, I would say.
Now, how long, for the listeners, how long does this last? So you go through 15, 18, whatever, how many neurostim treatments, how long does it last afterwards?
It's a good question. It's a complicated one, depending on what you do to yourself after you leave.
Absolutely. So if you fall back into those old habits, you're going to lose that.
You're going to lose it. Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to lose it. Brain's going to go back to the regular behavior.
Well, you're introducing stuff to your system that could significantly impact you. If you go back to drug use, then you're going to damage the system again. There's all sorts of ways that your brain gets damaged: emotionally, toxins, blunt injuries, concussions, all sorts of stuff. And so if you don't take care of it and use it correctly, don't feed it the right way, then it's going to be a problem. But if you do take care of it and you do feed it correctly, I say the big 3: nutrition, exercise, and sleep.
Absolutely.
You get those 3, and then you can add spirit to it as well. But the big 3 are important. You do that and take care of yourself, and efficacy can be anywhere from 5 to 10 years.
So wow, 5 to 10 years for that kind of that kind of feeling that you get, as long as you keep up with it. And it amazes me. I mean, I'm not, again, you're the expert, but when I talk to people sometimes, especially wellness providers or EAP teams, they're like, well, we don't know that much about the brain. Is that an accurate statement? I think we know a lot about the brain, which is what you were just talking about.
Well, I mean, we know some. I mean, you're thinking about some of the most complex noise in the known universe.
Yeah, absolutely.
You got 85 billion neurons up there with over 100 trillion synaptic and dendritic connections that creates roughly 7 quadrillion events per second.
Jesus. So it's the biggest supercomputer in the universe.
It's a lot. So we're scratching the surface. I think we're going to be looking at this and honestly, in terms of science, it's relatively young.
So where do you think we're going with this in the future? Obviously, we're doing great work down at FHE. You're doing great work. Where do you think this is going to evolve to in the future? Maybe that's too broad of a question.
I think we're going to start to understand the impact of energy on the brain and how we could use these methods that have, a low level of adverse effect, a high level of clinical outcome. I think we're going to get better at understanding it and using it and combining it with different kinds of energies. And I think our analysis methods are going to continue to improve where we can target different problems. I think we'll come up with more norm reference capabilities that allow us to kind of do population norms and stuff like that. I think we'll be able to it's kind of like checking the timing on your car. How do you listen to it the right way so you can tune it the right way?
Absolutely. You got to keep those tune-ups going.
Yeah, all the time.
Well, sir, I appreciate it. If is there any final thoughts you have for the listener right now who still has some doubts about like neurostimulation and the work we're doing down at FHE Health about, okay, taking care of your brain, and this is what you need to kind of get you reset?
Well, I think, be mindful of the fear that's out there. There's a lot of misinformation. You want to take a good hard look at the science and the studies that are present. There are a lot of ways to help yourself. There's a lot of ways to get better. This isn't the only way. It's one of many.
Sure.
And, like I said, the big three are huge. A lot of people, to achieve really good neurological health, just start eating right. They stop taking the drugs. They start sleeping right. They start exercising. They start working on themselves in a way where they start to understand their own dynamics, psychotherapy wise. And I mean, those are all important things to know. There is a lot to learn about what we're doing, but what I can say is that the jury's out, when it comes to the safety. It's extremely safe. It's definitely effective. I can say that beyond a shadow of a doubt. And I'm pretty damn skeptical when it comes down to it because I designed this stuff.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, it's something to take a hard look at. Absolutely.
Dr. Dogris, thank you for your time, sir. I appreciate all the work you're doing for everybody out there, not just first responders, but for everybody out there that are suffering, and all the wonderful things you're doing, sir. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. I hope you have a great day, and hopefully I'll see you soon.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, sir.